Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Today's guest is Professor Bovet from Switzerland, who is appreciated in the musical world as a many-sided, original and cultivated artist, active in many fields. He is constantly on the road, traveling to all parts of the world where organs are played, and keeps a busy concert schedule of about 60 recitals per year. His discography of more than 50 records and CDs includes recordings made mostly on historical instruments of Switzerland, France, Spain, Latin America, and lately also in Japan and in the Philippines. His activities in the preservation of historical instruments are appreciated all over the world, and he has advised organ builders and restorers in Europe, Japan, and both Americas, as well as in the Republic of the Philippines. With his wife, Marisa, he has revived the organ of the Alain family, for which Jean Alain composed most of his music. This instrument is now restored and reinstalled in one of the former convent buildings in the beautiful Clunisian side and village of Romainmôtier, Switzerland, where yearly organ academies are held under his direction. As a composer, he has worked much for theater and films, but his catalog of over 250 opus numbers includes all kinds of music. Much of his organ music has been published by various companies, Oxford University Press, Schola Cantorum, and Eulenburg. A scholar and investigator, he has also published over 2,000 various articles in musical journals on matters related to the organ. Professor Bovet is chief editor of the Swiss organ periodical La Tribune de l'Orgue. A specialist of Hispanic organ music, he has carried out a survey of historical organs in Mexico and Brazil in cooperation with UNESCO and the Swiss Cultural Foundation Pro Helvetia. During 20 years, he has taught courses for interpretation of Spanish organ music at the University of Salamanca. He is giving numerous master classes on this and other subjects in many festivals, universities and academies all over the world. He functions as a juror in major international organ competitions. Guy Bovet has been professor of organ at the Musikhochschule in Basel, Switzerland, from which he has retired in July 2008, an organist of the Collegiate Church of Neuchâtel from 1988 to 2009. He is honorary citizen of the city of Dallas, Texas, and doctor honoris clausa of the University of Neuchâtel. He has been honored twice by the Japanese government for his activities as a teacher and by the government of the Philippines for his activities in favor of the preservation of historical organs and the education of young Filipino organists. He has been awarded in 2007 the prestigious prize of the Institut Neuchâtelois. In this conversation, Professor Guy Bovet shares his insights about the future of organ art in the world. Let's go to the show. Welcome, Professor Bovet, to this conversation. I've been waiting to have this interview for many months now, and we've been connected via different means. You came to Vilnius 7 years ago and played remarkable recital at Vilnius University St. John's Church. I remember that very dearly. And you're so generous with all your activities throughout the organ world. Thank you so much for your time and insights and generosity. And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great. For starters, let me ask you the question that is always fantastic to hear the answer from our guests. When you were little, do you remember the time when you were first introduced to the pipe organ? Can you share us the story?
Yes, very well. A relative of mine, an aunt of mine, was an organist, Marie Dufour. She was an organist in Lausanne,
Yes.
And my grandmother, who played also the organ in small churches as an amateur, just sent me to her to have some organ lessons.
Uh-huh. And do you remember the specific feeling of that instrument? Was it a tracker instrument? Was it a mechanical action organ? Was it a very old organ?
Well, it was what I was interested in as a child was more the fact that the sound would be eternal. I mean, the sound would not fade away. That has much changed later because I am rather somebody who is interested in the rhythmical and in the clear playing of the organ, and so long sounds are not so much my thing anymore, but then it was that.
Mm-hmm. I see. And what happened later? Of course, what specifically inspired you to choose a professional organ career?
Oh, that was by chance, I would say, because when I made my bachelor in school, I jumped 1 year, and my father told me you can do what you want during that year. So I went to music school, and after the year when I was supposed to go back to the university, my teachers told my father, you cannot take this boy away. He should continue doing music, and then my father decided that it was a good idea. But first he was a little bit afraid because the profession is not safe, of course.
Uh-huh. But the times were much different than it is now, right? The interest with the pipe organ, can you say that it was more listeners were more interested in pipe organ during those times than it is now?
I can't really say that because then there were very few concerts, there were very few international organists around, and there was less public, and there were fewer concerts, of course. So I would say that now probably the interest is bigger because there are organ concerts everywhere, and there's some public everywhere.
Right, and of course you're known in the organ world as the one, probably the most legendary living organist who plays about 60 recitals per year and travels the globe multiple times each year. So how can you maintain this rather busy schedule during your travels? Do you get a little bit tired? What keeps you healthy during these travels?
Well, of course, traveling is not much fun right now, especially with all the things that happen in the world. But still, from the moment when you are on the road, it's okay. And usually now I accept concerts to play for people I know already, so I have the additional pleasure of meeting old friends and this kind of things. So the motivation is still there, the musical motivation is still there, but it's enhanced by other motivations.
True. And Professor Bovet, you're not only playing organs of various styles and sizes throughout the world, but you also probably hold the record of recording as many as 50 records and CDs of organ music, right, on historical instruments of various countries. Do you find recording of organ music similar to live performance, or it's a little bit different experience?
Not really. It's very different. I don't like very much recording, but sometimes it's necessary. I can give you an example. When I did my big recording in the Philippines, a few months later, there was the earthquake and the organs are now destroyed. So it is a document.
Right. Like an evidence, right, what was at that time. Fortunately, we have now also digital sampling of the pipes. Sometimes recording engineers can come to these historical organs and record every sound of every pipe and make it into a new sort of a new instrument to be like a documentation of the extant real historical instrument. So maybe this helps also preserve the original instrument as well. But of course, when earthquake destroys such an instrument, is very, very sad. By the way, Professor, you are involved and were involved, have been involved in many preservation of historical instrument projects throughout the world, right? What inspires you to consult and advise organ builders and organists and other experts on preservation and restorations of these historical instruments?
Well, I think that, of course, we're talking about music, and the best teachers are still the instruments. So if you want to have an idea and have a feeling of how the music was played and what the music really means, then you need to know the instruments. That's the main motivation in preservation of historical instruments.
True. Probably one of the best teachers is also an instrument itself, right? It's very important to have a good master besides you when you are studying organ, right? But it's even better if you have an accent to a real instrument, which of course you are very well known for reviving the organ of the Alain family, right? Can you tell us a little bit of a story of how this project came to be?
Yes. When Albert Alain died, the builder of the organ, the father of Jean and of Marie-Claire, when he died, the family had to leave the house where the organ was installed because it was the family is big and the house was not very big. And at that moment, the organ was in such bad shape that the family thought that it could not be rescued anymore. And also the family suggested to first try to have it classified as the historical monument, and the French authorities refused. Then they tried to have it classified as a non-historical monument because this is a category that exists in France, and they also refused that. And then they tried to offer it to several conservatories and other institutions. And the restoration, the cost for the restoration of the instrument would have been probably higher than just building a new instrument. So the family was desperate. And one day I met Marie-Claire Alain in Stuttgart, and we had a memorable dinner together with colleagues like Jon Laugvik, Ludger Lohmann, and Martha Schuster. And we were talking about the organ, and as we were a little drunk probably at the end of the meal, I told Marie-Claire, if you give me the organ, I will restore it. So she took a piece of paper from the tablecloth, it was a very simple restaurant, and signed a document that she would give me the organ. So we got the organ into Switzerland and started an association, and this association helped us to finance the restoration of the instrument. That's the story.
Fantastic story, fantastic work, and you're such a great example for people around the world. You know, for organists of any country who just happen to see a valuable historical instrument, maybe in need of restoration, quality restoration, maybe he or she can jump in and try to collect the number of friends, a little bit of network to combine efforts and to secure funding, and so maybe this valuable instrument in whatever country it is, maybe that will be preserved also. So you are leading by example, Professor, and I'm so delighted that you are doing this up to this day. And also as a composer, for example, you are known not only for the organ world, for your more than 250 opus numbers of various musical compositions, but also to the general public, because I remember the time when you came to Lithuania. I remember those 7 years ago. My choir director from Vilnius University knew about your compositions, and I was so fascinating that people not only from organ world but also from other areas know about you. So do you like to compose these days as well, Professor?
Well, I'm still. I always have something on the. I would say worked on, and yes, I like it. It's rather an amusement for me because I'm not really a composer, but I like it. It's a kind of hobby for me.
True. Music is like a language, right? And you probably express whatever is not possible in words. You express in notes, right?
I suppose that yes, a real composer would say that. What I say is it's more a game for me.
Right. People love your compositions, especially those let's say funny, humorous compositions, like the Hamburger Prelude, right, and Salamanca, and these things are fantastic to play, and organists love to play during recitals because the audiences around the world enjoy such a music, right? In these days when it's kind of tricky to connect with the general organ music lover with a scholastic four-part fugue, for example. But your compositions,
you're right.
Your compositions serve this need for quality organ music, but in a kind of different way. They connect, they tell a story. They are more connected to the today's person, right? How you when you compose, Professor, do you think of the people who will be hearing, listening to your pieces as well?
Well, usually my compositions, it's been a few years since I really never composed anything that wasn't a commission. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I always think of the people who have commissioned the work.
Right, and they will play probably, or find somebody who will play, and the end result. Do they tell you what kind of venue, what kind of organ it will be presented on?
Yes, they do. Usually, well, one of the last things I did was for a new but historic Spanish organ in the University of Mainz in Germany, and they had a copy of a Spanish Baroque instrument built, and they asked several composers to compose something new music for the old instrument. So you always think of the instrument, you think of the people, and you think it's more a personal activity than having to express great general feelings like the romantic composers.
Mm-hmm. But you know what's remarkable about your music, Professor, is that they sound particularly well on those historical instruments. I think you are designing those with that kind of concept in mind, aren't you?
Yes, of course. You mentioned Salamanca. Salamanca is written for an organ, a historical organ in Salamanca in Spain. And many of my compositions are thought to be played on historical instruments. There's another thing is that, these old organs don't really interest many people in the general public. So it is also important to show that these old organs can also be a vehicle to carry new music or newer music.
Absolutely, because if you go, for example, to Italy or to Spain, right, we organists would probably traditionally perform that kind of style, stylistically appropriate music. But if you think about the listener, they probably heard that music hundreds of times, right? That kind of style.
Exactly.
So your input probably refreshes their spirit also and provides new insights into what is possible from stylistical perspective to be relevant in this time and age.
I think you're right, and concert organizers are, of course, looking for attractive programs for their public, and very often it happens that if you're invited, for example, on a classical French organ, that the organizer asks you not to play classical French music because everybody does that, and try to play something else so that the public has a different experience than always hearing the same kind of music.
Well, exactly. You have to find your own angle to be remarkable in this day and age. Otherwise, you will be just not on. I'm not talking about you, Professor, but in general about the organists who will play everything, right? But if you find your angle to try to be remarkable, to trying to be something different, try not to play what everybody else is playing, then maybe you might have some freshness in your approach too.
Well, it's just a love to the instrument, and that's important because the instruments are extremely important. They tell us the secrets of early music, and you can help that with new music.
Right. And do you know, Professor, for what kind of instrument did Francisco Correa de Araujo wrote his compositions that you issued a new edition of his treatise, Facultad Orgánica?
Well, it's a standard Spanish instrument with a keyboard of 45 keys, so from C to C, and the first octave is a short octave, and the keyboard is divided in bass and treble, so you can have different sounds in the left hand and in the right hand, but it's a very standard instrument.
Right. And of course, José Lidón also. Of course, it's different, little bit period, right? Later.
Well, of course, it's much later, and José Lidón is already in the Scarlatti school. I would say in the more galant school of organ music.
Right. You're known also to the organ world as the author of about or over 2,000 articles, scholarly articles published in various musical journals and magazines on matters related to the organ art. Do you find that writing in text your ideas helps to preserve the pipe organ art?
I don't know, but since I'm the redactor of one of those publications, you have to write 60 pages every 3 months, and so you write about just about anything that comes into your mind.
Right, you have those editorial deadlines probably set up for you internally, not only externally. So you have kind of internal motivation to be useful, right, for the organ profession, but also external, because you know that people will wait for your words and wisdom, right? Do you find it a difficult process to contribute in scholarly articles, or is it comes to you easy, like 1, 2, 3?
It's very easy because there's always something new, interesting that comes up, and so you feel like writing something or researching something, and it goes. The organ world is very, very big, and so one of the last things I did was an article on the Third Symphony by Saint-Saëns. So you see that it's not only early music, but it's also romantic music. Sometimes it's modern music. So you have all kinds of. It's all such an interesting world that it's not very difficult to find subjects.
Mm-hmm. True. You only have to keep your eyes and ears open, right, for the ideas, and they will come to you.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Inevitably. Only when they come to us, right, those ideas, our responsibility is probably to do something with those ideas, because probably one of the worst thing we can do is to forget those ideas and to dismiss probably them and not to do anything about that.
Oh, you think these things are always recorded somewhere in a library or so, and maybe sometimes, something you write will be useful 50 years later or 100 years later.
Yes, that's our vision, right? To help spread the word about pipe organ art, and in whatever way we can. And when you travel the world, not only with organ recitals and various other activities, you also teach, right? During master classes and workshops in many universities and academies. Do you find that the level of organists throughout the world changing, improving as the time passes?
It is improving very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it is much more difficult for young organists now to find work and to survive on that profession.
True. Everybody is so competitive, right? They can play fast and loud. Everybody is very technically advanced, right? But how can you, as a young person, for example, how can you basically find your place in our organ world? Do you have any insights about that?
Well, there are still the competitions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that any artist needs a kind of motor. That means somebody to manage him, or to know how to manage himself or herself.
Mm-hmm.
So that is of course difficult. But and many organists do the business of you invite me, I invite you.
Right.
This kind of things that brings sometimes good organists and sometimes not so good organists. And as I said, the competitions, records, mm-hmm. And so everybody tries to find a place. But it is really much more difficult now than it was then.
Right, because there are so many of us, right, doing the same thing. And Professor, when you serve as a juror for international organ competitions, do you find that the approach of performing something just once, just like in a race, in a athletics or in any kind of competitive sport, is representative of that person's level, artistic level?
No, I don't think so. What I'm interested in is really if the player is able to, I would say, to carry a musical message and to convince a listener just by her or his playing, and not really whether he does things right or whether he plays no wrong notes or something like that. So usually you hear, if somebody's good, you hear that after 5 or 10 seconds, you already know. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, some people need to be educated further and need to learn about some of the historical details. But I don't think that's the most interesting, and I don't think that's the most important part of the job. The most important part of the job is to find musicians that can communicate.
True. When you go to these competitions, do you try those instruments yourself ahead of time?
Well, usually I inform myself about the repertoire which is going to be played in the competition, because sometimes there are pieces that one doesn't know. For example, many competitions have a modern piece. Usually it's a piece that has been commissioned or quite a modern music. So you have to be prepared to have an idea, to listen to that music, even if you don't know it, if you don't have played it yourself. But the most important thing is really the communication of the artist, and that you can hear even if you don't know a piece.
Right. Professor, your activities throughout the world in terms of advancing organ art and organ as an instrument itself has been awarded and recognized by various honorary citizen awards, for example, in the city of Dallas, right, in Texas, or honorary doctorate award of the University of Neuchâtel. And I've read about you that you've been awarded by the Japanese government, right?
Yes, the Japanese government, the Philippine government. I have a honorary doctorate also from the Chopin University in Warsaw. So, yeah, sure, the people who are now in charge for these things have been students earlier, and very many times I find out when we went to Warsaw for this ceremony there, I found out that the rector of the university had been a student in my courses 30 years before.
True. I remember you came here in Vilnius, right? And in Vilnius also you met this mechanical action organ, which, by the way, was kind of independently or otherwise inspired by your works. Rimantas Gučas, the maker of this instrument and our common friend, was inspired by your initiative or recommendation to do this mechanically, to do this the original way. So so your efforts to really preserve that kind of art is very, very interesting and valuable to the world. And Professor, when we talk about a little bit about Far East, about Japan, when you go there, do you find that situation about the pipe organ there is different from the Western society?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not much. Of course, they don't have, or they have very few church organs, but there are some churches with organs, some Christian churches with organs. But there, the organ business is really a concert hall business. But I would say that the Japanese have come along very, very fast, very quickly, and they have, because it's of course a very cultivated society as well, and we have seen over the years the Japanese understanding better and better Western music, and this went pretty fast, really, pretty quickly. Now we have similar, I would not say problems, but we have similar phenomena with the people from South Korea, with the people from China, but that is not going to be very long, because now everything, the culture is going very fast, and people learn very fast. Also, many people study abroad, and I was surprised the other day. I was in St. Petersburg, and to find an organ in the classical French style and an organ in the Gottfried Silbermann style in the Finnish church in St. Petersburg, and so on. So all this is going really, really quickly.
So organ art is becoming a global phenomenon, probably, right? Global meaning that the ideas from the hemisphere to hemisphere, from one continent to another continent, can cross in seconds, right? Now with technology, and can influence organ builders in many countries, right?
I think so, yes. And for example, you're in Vilnius, and Vilnius was the first city where I went in Eastern Europe. Long time ago. It was in the 60s.
Right.
First time when it was still in the Soviet Union. because I met your big master, Leopoldas Digris.
True.
And Leopoldas Digris I had met in a competition, and then he asked me to compose something. And the first time I came was to listen to the first performance of this concerto in the concert hall in Vilnius. And then I played in the cathedral and played in Kaunas, also in other places. And that was the beginning. But then it was quite interesting to see that the Soviet Union did actually very good things. They had many concert organs built in all the cities of the Union, and that was a really good decision, and that was also something that helped spreading the art of the organ throughout the entire continent. So one has to acknowledge that, because it was remarkable to see how the Soviet government understood that this could be interesting as well. And then coming back to the Far East, the Japanese also have very quickly realized that they should build organs, and first they started buying organs in Western Europe, and then they had some good organ builders that were educated in Europe, and that started building good instruments also in Japan. So that's they have their own organ builders. The same in the Philippines. They have a very good organ builder in the Philippines, and I'm sure that in not long time there will be organ builders also in South Korea. There will be organ builders in China. There will be organ builders about everywhere. So that's interesting to see how our instrument has awakened interest in faraway countries.
True. And Professor, of course, when you look at those Eastern countries, they're not particularly connected with the Christianity, right? And the organ was the flagship of that idea movement, right? In Christianity, and organ was connected very much for centuries, right? Even now, probably it has a quite strong, at least, heritage. But what about those countries who adapt organ as specifically musical instrument, concert instrument? How they manage to, connect those secular ideas with sacred musical compositions, for example?
Well, I suppose that the organ should be first a musical instrument. And actually we suffer in Western Europe, we suffer from the connotation, the amalgam between the church and the organ. I don't say that religious music is not good. I don't say that, but I say that the organ can play normal music as well. And that it is very good that some countries that don't have a Christian background have started building organs late, just like the Soviet Union, just like Japan, and so started building organs as musical instruments. And very often we have to fight here against mediocre organists who play just in churches and have, of course, an audience and have also a salary to play in these churches, and sometimes they are not really good ambassadors for the music. So the problem is complex, but I think that of course the organ has started being used in Christian churches, but I think that there is a lot of good organ music. It might be inspired by sacred ideas, but there's lots of good organ music that has nothing to do with the church, and which is perfectly valuable as well as just as pure music.
When you go throughout the world and Professor, try out different kinds of organs, right? In those churches, for example, where you find mediocre organists and very general audience or congregation which doesn't even know what's possible on their instrument, don't they tell you after your concert that they didn't know that their instrument can sound like that?
Yes, of course, they say that all the time.
True. It's because their local organist, of course, doesn't show any interest, probably, or ability, let's say, to expand his or her horizons, right? To educate a little bit his congregation.
Well, even when the local organist is excellent, when somebody else comes and plays the instrument that the people know, the sounds are different. The way to use the stops and the way to touch the keyboards is different. And very often, even in churches where we have very, very good organists, I've been hearing saying, "Oh, we never heard that sound," or "We never," and this kind of statements after the concert. So it's not only when they are mediocre organists, but it's just that when you have a different artist, the instrument sounds differently. We even, when I was teaching in America, we were sometimes with my students experimenting, having the same piece played by several students with the same registration, and still the organ sounded completely different when it was played by one person or by another.
True. Every person is different, every organ is different, and if you touch the same organ but with different approach, it might sound quite drastically different, right?
I think so, because also the interaction between playing, the physical act of playing, of hitting the keys, of pressing the keys and of releasing them, depends also how the organist is listening to the sound that comes out of the organ. So if there is a close relationship between what you hear and the way the instrument is played, then of course it becomes very interesting.
Professor, I've heard that you recorded one particular recording with mechanical noises of the pipe organ. It's fascinating, isn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Oh, that was just a joke. We just noticed that the organ was very noisy. Then I played a piece by Bach. It was actually a chorale from the Orgelbüchlein. And I played a piece by Bach just for fun. And then the result was quite funny. And the noises were interesting, so we thought we would put it on the record as a joke. Many people didn't understand that it was a joke, and even last year, still some musicologists from America called me to ask me where I found that manuscript, and I told him, "Well, look in the Orgelbüchlein by Bach, and you will find the manuscript." Fantastic. So, it was just a joke.
Right, and those kind of musical adventures you encounter probably in every city where you go, wherever you appear, right? Professor, do you need lots of time for a preparation of these concerts on unfamiliar instruments?
I never know. You may have, you can have 60 years of experience and still not know whether you will need 6 hours, 9 hours, or 2 hours to prepare a recital on an organ that you don't know before. So that all depends on many things. It might also be just how you feel yourself and how the acoustics and so on and so on. So you can never know. I always try to come to a place 2 days before the concert.
And do you feel any kind of anxiety about the factor of the unknown during performance?
Not really. I feel anxiety when I'm not well prepared, but not when I'm well prepared. Then this is just, as the Russians say, "Всё будет." You just play the best you can, and then things happen.
True. true. Of course, you're also known as an improviser, great, fantastic improviser. What is more fascinating to you, playing repertoire or improvising?
I don't like improvising anymore,
You don't.
so I try not to do it anymore in concerts. It's fantastic for service playing, and sometimes just to make a little encore. But I try not to improvise in concerts anymore because you tend to fall into the same patterns all the time, and people are expecting some kind of circus number. And all that, so it's a combination of the expectation of the public and also of your limitations. And of course, also there are so many excellent improvisers now in the world that, well, there are always people that can do it better than oneself. On the other hand, playing a piece that is written is always probably better than improvising a piece. I don't know. It is just you cannot give general rules for that. But I just tell you, actually, what it boils down to is that I don't really like anymore to improvise in concerts.
But I can testify myself, when you visited Vilnius the last time, 7 years ago, you tried out this mechanical organ at St. John's Church. And you did improvise in front of a few people, right? Your wife Marisa was there, myself, and a few others, right? And it was just as fascinating to hear as a written out piece, at least for me.
Yes, improvising is wonderful for trying organs because when you don't know an organ, the organ will tell you what to do. Then when you play a program, then you know the organ, and you try to make a program that will be suitable for the organ. But it's not really, trying out organs, making organ trips to discover instruments that you don't know, then improvising is really wonderful.
Right, as a tryout, as a warm-up, as getting to know the instrument more closely, right?
Yes, and you can see, if you look, for example, in the compositions by Bach, many compositions, for example, think of Toccata in C major, Toccata, Adagio, and Fugue.
True.
This is typical. At the beginning, Bach is trying out the organ. He tries the keyboards, then he tries the pedal board, and still no idea coming. And then suddenly at the end of that, you have an idea. If you look, for example, also at the Prelude and Fugue in A minor, the beginning, he tries with one hand, he starts playing and does this kind of arpeggios, chromatic going down, and then suddenly the idea is coming, and then he starts playing real music. But you can see that, of course, many of his compositions are imitating somebody who is improvising first and trying out things, and then suddenly has an idea and starts making music.
If when talking about Bach, for example, or other composers of that period, do you think they first improvised their pieces and then written down later, or vice versa, the opposite way?
No. I think they first improvised because in that time, until the end of the 18th century, composers were only composing for the poor colleagues who didn't know how to improvise. And basically, if you look at Frescobaldi, if you look at many other composers, it is just this kind of pieces could be improvised by people, but a composer would publish some works because his improvisations are better than other ones, and so he knew that he could sell them. And I think that, of course, first everybody was improvising. And then when the music became more complicated, I would say from Johann Sebastian Bach, from that moment, the music was getting so complicated that you had to write it down if you wanted to make elaborate fugues, just like Bach did. The little fugatos that you find in Buxtehude's work, for instance, the little fugato could be improvised, could still be improvised. They're short and they're never very elaborate. But then, of course, came the time when writing down the music was necessary.
Do you think that today the young organists from around the world would still need to learn the art of improvisation in addition to performance? Is it a valuable skill?
I would say the young musicians, young children should learn to improvise before they learn to play written music. And it would be very important to teach children to improvise before making them play the first prelude of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier or whatever they play, but to teach them how to relate to the instrument and to improvise something, to play a song that they have heard and all that. So I would say absolutely everybody should learn to improvise.
Start basically musical education from improvisation.
Probably, I suppose so. Yes.
Well, it's less stressful at least, right? You don't need to learn the grand staff, right, notation right away. You can try out things and little by little add some notational practices. But get to know the instrument from inside out in a really gentle way by just playing it, probably.
Yeah, I think so. In any case, an immediate relationship to the instrument is something that is important.
Right. And Professor, when we look into the future, for example, I know that Christian Church is probably, in many cases, is no longer interested in advancing the organ art and at least preserving the instruments for the future generations. What is the main road or the path organ world might take in order to preserve this art for future generations?
Well, you're right. I mean, the church is probably losing ground now. But first of all, I don't think that this will last forever. There will certainly be a comeback. Now, the fact that the priests and the pastors are not educated musically anymore is a problem of education. And this problem of education is the same problem everywhere in the schools. Music lessons and things like that, or foreign languages, or things like that. Everywhere the quality is going down. So this is one of the problems. Now, the church, I think it's almost good that the church is, for the music, that the church is losing ground, because it will eliminate all this, the bad players, it will eliminate the bad music, all these terrible little chorales by Pachelbel and Böhm and all these mediocre composers of the past and of the present. It will just make that only the best will survive. So I am not very concerned about that. The only thing is that, and in many cases you can say before the church was supporting art, now it's the art that is supporting church. So
absolutely true, Professor. Yeah. Because because the art adds more value now to the church, right?
Yes, exactly. So I think that I'm not really concerned. I think that there is an evolution that is cyclical, and for the moment it's going in that direction. But perhaps it will come back later. In the world, you always have had big moments for one particular thing, and then, or even the nations, nations that have been powerful before now are second or third rank nations in political terms. All this is just changing, and I think that all we can do is try to make as good music as possible, and not be too much concerned about the education. That is another concern, because we have to educate our children and our students so that they keep a certain level of civilization. And obviously this is not being done correctly everywhere and not at all levels. So, but, then we could talk for hours.
True. And of course, the church faces many problems, right? And education is not quality education worldwide in terms of cultural and musical background, right? But that's systematic problem. Do you think, Professor, that a regular person, like let's say an organist living in a particular city or town, could help to preserve organ art in his city, for example, by doing organ demonstrations for children of his school, for inviting audiences to listen to other storytelling improvisations, for example, which connect with the audience, doing these things, innovative things and creative things.
Well, absolutely. I'm sure that we have something to do for the public. And what we do for the public, we do for our instrument.
Mm-hmm. True. And of course, when you arrange, for example, this kind of demonstration for 6, 7, 8 or 11-year-olds, from time to time you might get an interesting, curious child come up to you and say or ask, where can I find out more about the organ? Who can teach me to play, right? And that's our hope.
Oh yes, it happens. It happens more often than one thinks.
So fantastic conversation, Professor, so thought-provoking and gives a lot of ideas for people around the world. Before we end this interview, Professor Bovet, could you please give our listeners a place or a link where they can find more information about you and your work?
Well, I have a web page. It is www. And then Guy Bovet in one word, and .org.
Right, guybovet.org. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And there they will find also a lot of other links to other projects and things, and so that if they pass through this site, they can find some information.
You've been so generous with your time and ideas, Professor. Before we end, for the final question, can you go back into your early years of playing the organ, and could you share something that you wish you knew when you first started playing organ?
Well, not really, because I had excellent teachers, and then. And also, what is important is that it was in the time where you could have excellent teachers, but the teachers didn't know anything about history, and so on. So people of my generation had to go to libraries, had to travel to find out what would interest them, and it was very. Now you find everything on the internet. But then you had really to work to find information. And I think that was a chance. It was a chance because having to travel to Prague to look at a manuscript instead of just staying home and hitting the keys of your computer also makes that what you find is more valuable to you. Mm-hmm. So I would say that of course, I have worked a lot, and many of my colleagues have worked a lot to get the information that is now easy to find, and that most of the good organ teachers we have in the world will just give to their students. But I I think that what you have found yourself always helps you more than what you have learned from others.
Right. You are your own teacher in a way, right?
In a certain way, yes.
So thank you for this piece of advice to be, well, to stay curious, right? To look for things, to try to reinvent things, to stay ahead of the pack, basically, right?
Yes. Well, that was a good conversation. Thank you, Mr. Pinkevicius, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, and I will keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.